to present. And with that, I'm going to welcome Kelly and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Nora, and thanks for making this. This happen. Your work in support of organizations, nonprofit organizations in our state, helping them really think about a new future is really something. And it's been great working with you, and I just appreciate you so much. And I am coming from Bisbee, Arizona, and hopefully we'll have a good connection. When you hear people talk about how we need to strengthen the infrastructure in our rural communities, you might appreciate why that is after today's webinar. I'm glad to be with you. I'm going to start sharing my screen here and share some thoughts with you about how to find your perfect 10. There is no Tinder for nonprofit organizations looking for a strategic partner, but I think there is a way to identify who a good strategic partner for your organization might be. These are our goals for this webinar and for this webinar series. First of all, we really hope to bring to you a very deliberate and thorough do-it-yourself process for identifying potential partners. A few tools, a few simple tools, and our support and encouragement. There are three main types of strategic relationships that you can form with other organizations. There are collaborations where you maybe collaborate together on a program or on even an earned revenue kind of a program. There are alliances where you have a much closer relationship, but you're still separate organizations. This might look like a fiscal sponsorship, for example. What we're talking about in this webinar series is the third kind, strategic restructuring. And strategic restructuring is a less scary way of saying words that have been kind of scary in the nonprofit sector: mergers and acquisitions. That's really what we're talking about. We're talking about two organizations that come together to become one. Now, if that is freaking you out, we get it. This can be a really scary concept, and it can conjure up images of, organizations on the brink of death, and it can be a little bit scary. But there are a lot of good reasons to consider a merger or acquisition, even when we're not in the middle of a global pandemic. Joining together with another organization or several other organizations can really broaden your range of services, so you can reach more people or you can reach different demographics. It can improve the quality of your services if you join together with someone who has a particular expertise. It can strengthen the operational control in your organization. In other words, maybe one of the things that you really need is a stronger back office, more financial expertise, more operations expertise. This could be a way to strengthen that for your work. It can be a way to attract new and potentially bigger sources of funding. The truth is that organizations that have a budget of, say, $300,000 a year, they qualify for different kinds of grants often than organizations that have $1 million or $5 million or $25 million dollar budget. So this can position you to qualify for more funding. It can alleviate financial stress. It's tough being a small organization. I think being an organization of around $1 million, to 2 million to 3 million can be kind of a tough size when you're fundraising year over year. Getting bigger can alleviate some of that financial stress. And yes, it can help you avoid a scenario where you're forced to close your doors. And I know there are lots of organizations right now in the middle of this COVID-19 situation that are really thinking about their future and wondering what it looks like. And so, yes, a merger or an acquisition could help you Keep your programming going, keep your mission going, even if the structure of your organization changes. So if you're ready, or when you're ready to consider a merger or acquisition of strategic restructuring, the first thing you need to do is to identify a potential partner. And the first thing you should do, I'm talking right now to CEOs or executive directors out there and your board chairs, the first thing you want to do is to convince yourself that you don't have to do this alone. This can be kind of a lonely feeling. Don't do it alone. The first thing you should do is put together a team. Here's what your team will do. First of all, oversee the process from beginning to end, all through the negotiation period into implementation. The team will also work with you to identify and vet potential partners. We'll get to that in a minute. The team will lead negotiations on behalf of your organization. And the team, in the end, will be the folks to make a recommendation to the board about whether or not to move forward with a partnership. Who should be on the team? Well, it shouldn't be really big. I think 7 might even be too big, but certainly somewhere in that range, 7 or less. And you don't just want people, the first person to raise their hand, or folks that don't have a lot of other things on their plates. Here's what you want. You want people who can and will make this process a top priority. The way I've sketched the process out, it really doesn't require a lot of time from people on the core team during this initial process. I'll share a schedule with you towards the end of this webinar. But it can be intense. And so you need people who are willing to prioritize this in their lives. I think you also want people who have influence within the organization. People who, when they speak, when their voice is heard, members of the staff, members of the board, donors, they listen. And you're going to be looking for people with particular expertise and information that you'll need through this process, or people who have a particular stake in the organization. So who are these folks? Well, always the CEO or executive director and the board chair. That's a non-negotiable. In addition to those two folks, you're going to be looking at your C-suite members, your COO, your CFO, or the equivalent, or key program directors if you don't have a C-suite. You're going to be looking at key board members, and if your founder is still engaged in the organization, you're going to want to make sure that they're involved in this process as well, and a member of the team. So here is what might look like a very complicated way of picking your core team. It's not really complicated. It's just different than going with your gut. I'm going to really encourage you to be thoughtful and deliberate about every single phase of this process, including who's on your team. So this is a way of scoring potential core team members. You see across the top of this grid, you see those requirements that I talked about here. So you're talking about people who are able and willing to prioritize the work, who have influence in the organization, who have expertise and or information that you're going to need, and have a unique stake in the organization. So here's what I recommend you do. Use the board chair and the CEO or the executive director sit down together and talk about who the potential core team members are, and make a list all the way down that left-hand side, and put every single name and their role in the organization. And then as clearly as you can think about it, give each of those individuals a score of 1 to 5 in each of those different areas, add up their score, and then you can see, the top scorers, you can make a decision then about who ought to be on your team. And you're going to try to keep it between 5 to 7 people. So this is a very deliberate approach. And I just want you to get used to the idea that, no, sorry, not this data. I want you to get used to the idea that data is going to be important in this process. And here's why. Your stakeholders, your staff, your volunteers, your board members, your donors, your form with another organization was as deliberate and thorough as it could possibly be. Don't let them down. So throughout this process, you'll be seeing a lot of these kinds of metrics and scoring, and it's important to the process. Number 2, when and if you're ready, get your core team set up. The next thing you're going to want to do is to establish some organization-specific metrics. What I mean by that is you have to figure out what really matters to your organization. The thing is, before you start looking for a partner, you need to really be clear about who you are. So you need to look at yourself. Don't be shy about your strengths. These are the things that you'll bring to a partnership. Even if your organization is in financial desperation and you're desperate for a partner, even if that's the case, you have all kinds of strengths, assets, experiences, partnerships, social capital. You have strengths and you'll bring those to the partnership. It's what's going to make a partner want to partner with you. But you also need to be honest about your needs. That's why you're looking for a partner after all. And the best partnership is where your partner has what you need and you have what your partner needs. And it's a kind of a beautiful dance. That's the best possible scenario. There are a lot of different ways to look at yourself. This is a tool that my team and I developed over a decade ago that we use to help organizations see what's possible. We call it a PAWN process. It stands for purpose, assets, wows, and needs. And as a part of the PAWN process, you're looking at, first of all, your purpose, your mission. You're looking at your neighbor, your context, your potential partner, and you're looking at yourself. The PAWN process, we developed it because we were aware of some of the limitations of the SWOT analysis, for example. The PAWN process is purpose-driven, it's asset-based, it encourages collaboration with your neighbors and other organizations rather than competition. It's a reminder that the smallest piece on the board can be the most powerful. And it's useful if you haven't done a self-assessment recently. If you have done one, just use that. Or if you have another tool that you like better, use that. The important thing is to do this self-assessment right up front. And you're going to want to start with your purpose, your mission. Here's how I like to help groups really remember what their mission is. Because I think sometimes we can get really tangled up and we think about what we do. We think about our programs. We think about our services. Your purpose isn't your program, isn't your service. Your purpose is the reason you exist. It's the thing that drives you. And so one of the things that I like to do with groups is to have them describe their mission without making a single reference to a program or service. You'd be surprised how sometimes it takes a long time for a group to really get to the core of what they're about. But it's important at this early stage for your core team to do that together, because, you know, you're going to be in negotiations with another organization, and maybe all of your programs or all of your services won't make sense. Your programs and your services are not what this is about. It's about making sure that your mission goes on. The second thing that, you know, once you're clear about your mission, now really do that self-assessment. I like to use a collaborative process with groups where I have them, first of all, as an individual, just sit down and make a list of all the assets they think their organization has, all the wows they see within that organization, the good things, really good things that are happening, and then a list of the needs. And once each individual has done that work together, Then I like to put them into small groups and have them share their lists with each other and come out with a common, a joint list. And then once the small groups have done that, bring the groups together and work together to create a single list for the whole group of your assets, wows, and needs. It takes maybe an hour to go through this process, but it's worth it. Now, once you've done the self-assessment, you're ready to create your own unique metrics for your organization for identifying and vetting potential partners. What does that look like? Well, create a grid. Excel is your friend in this process. Across the top of the grid, you're going to put, first of all, a place where you're going to be listing all of your potential partners. And then the very next thing you're going to put on the grid is mission alignment, because that is a non-negotiable, right? You have to be mission aligned. It doesn't have to be the same mission, but it has to align with your partner. Next, you're going to put your top need, right? You've gone through this process of identifying all the needs in your organization. You're going to want to choose together as a core team, what is your top need? So you put your mission, alignment, finance, and your top need. I have financial stability there because that's the top need for so many organizations going through this process, but it might be something else. And then you add all the rest of the needs that you have identified as a core team. Put them across the top. Then you get to the number 3, identifying potential partners. And I encourage people to make the biggest list they possibly can of potential partners, because the bigger the list is, the bigger your imagination will be. The truth is that your future partner is probably already a partner, an organization that you share services or funding or grant writing or staff with, or a friend, somebody that you maybe aren't in mutual programming, or you're not necessarily working with them, but you're friends. CEOs are friends with each other. A program staff know each other and work together, brainstorm together, or a frenemy. A frenemy is somebody who is in the same kind of work that you're in and maybe competes for the same funding. Probably your future partner is one of these 3 things, but don't jump too fast. The obvious choice is not always the best choice. In fact, what I recommend is that you crowdsource this list of potential partners to make it as big as it can possibly be. Because I've found that, you know, CEOs or EDs, program staff, even board members can, when they get to this point, can have a very narrow view of who a good partner might look like. And it helps to hear the voices of people who care about you and who know your work and appreciate your work. So my recommendation is that you make a list of community partners, funding partners, industry experts, not a big group, maybe 5 or 6. And you call those people and you ask them to spend an hour with you and your core team, helping you think about the future of your organization. Get them together for a stakeholder meeting. It doesn't have to take more than an hour. I'm assuming that for a while, meetings are going to be held via Zoom. And so get them together for about an hour. Tell them, why you've brought them there, that you're looking for a partner who can join with you to strengthen your mission for the future. It should be an optimistic, hopeful message that you share with these stakeholders. You are being good stewards of the mission, and you're looking ahead and you want to identify some partners. So ask them to help you. Here are some good brainstorming prompts. Where do you see the wows happening in our sector? Who out there is doing amazing things? Who out there needs what we have? Who has assets that you think we need? Who does what we do? Who does something similar to what we do? Do some brainstorming. No right or wrong. Just take their ideas and thank them. Once you've got this list of puts, you're going to want to give each of them a score. You have metrics, you've created them for your organization, So use them. Here's what it looks like. You've got all of your identify the things that you want to see in a partner. You list all the potential partners column. And then just go metric by metric by metric and give each of these organizations a score from 1 to 3. 1 is low, it's not a 3 is really high. Give each of these organizations a score in each category. So you can see St. Pete's, these are all made up organizations, of course. St. Pete's is a 3. They share a mission alignment with you as if you are twins. Their financial stability isn't fantastic, but it's not terrible either. It's somewhere in the middle. They've got a kind of a medium, strong infrastructure. They've got a kind of relatively good facility. They don't have a lot of expertise in whatever it is you need expertise in. The example I'm using is a new line of business that you want to start. But it could be expertise in writing grants, federal grants. It could be expertise in fundraising. St. Pete's doesn't have the expertise that this sample organization needs. It's got kind of medium political connections, really strong bilingual staff, which is something that's important to this sample organization, but it doesn't serve a much different geography than this sample organization does. So give each organization a score in each category and then add those points up. And then you figure out the overall match by simply dividing the total points they have by the total points possible. So in this case, there are 24 possible points. 16 divided into 24 is 62%. So St. Pete's is a 62% overall match. This is a process that I think probably your staff is going to be best at doing. And so this is a job that you're probably going to give to the staff, and the staff will report the results back to the core team. And the core team then will be able to organize and analyze this data in order to select the top candidates to interview. Here's how it works. You're going to want to create a scatter plot for your top 2 needs. So mission is always one of your top needs. So that's going to be on one of the axes. And the other one in this sample case, remember their second most important need, mission alignment was 1, financial stability was 2. So we've put money on the other axis on this scatter plot. Mission and money, the 2 most important things. And then we've plotted the organizations based on how they scored, right? So let's go back to St. Pete's. St. Pete is a 3 in mission alignment, really strong, but only kind of in the middle on financial stability. So St. Pete's is, sorry, making my screen too small. St. Pete's is right on that, on the scatter plot, right where strong mission and fair money meet. There are other organizations that scored differently. GHC scored a 3 on mission alignment and a 3 ability. So you see GHC is right at the intersection of strong mission and strong money. So you're going to use that chart where you've scored your potential partners, and you're going to plot them on the scatter plot based on, first of all, those 2 most important things. Now, this is the magic triangle. Those organizations that score anywhere in that triangle, you can see strong and strong, mission and money, strong and strong. You're going to want that to look especially hard at those organizations in that triangle. And in this sample case, there were 3: St. Pete's, GHC, and New World. Some of the organizations, People First, for example, They're strong in financial stability, but they're really weak on mission alignment. They fall outside of that magic triangle. Agency 0 is weak on both mission alignment and financial stability. So you can see they're outside of that triangle as well. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to identify those organizations that land in that magic triangle, and you're going to want to take them one step further. You're going to want to plot those organizations based on the overall fit, based on your metrics, based on the overall fit with your organization, and the relationship that you have with them already. So you can see now that we've taken the 3 magic triangle organizations and we've plotted them according to overall fit and relationship. And St. Pete's, even though there was strong mission alignment, the overall fit was pretty low, 70%. Also, the sample organization doesn't have a relationship with St. Pete's. They know about them, they know about the work they do, they're in the community, but they've never really worked with them. CEOs don't know each other. Program staff doesn't really know each other very well. There really isn't a relationship. In this sample, there were 2 of the potential partners that end up in that part of the scatter plot where you want to be looking at candidates to interview. New World and GHC. GHC not only was a 3 and a 3 in mission and money, the 2 most important things for this sample organization, but they also scored a 90% on overall fit. And this sample organization has partnered with GHC on programming and on grant writing together. New World scored pretty high on mission and money, so they made it to this phase of the process. Their overall fit is good, 80% or more, and they're friends of the sample organization. So these organizations that score above a good and are friends, any organizations that are above that dotted line, those are the organizations that you're going to want to look at to interview. Now, in this sample, we only have 6 organizations that we're looking at. My guess is that when you get your stakeholders together and you start making a list of potential partners to look at, you're going to have somewhere between 20 and 30. The organizations that I've worked with to do this process, to go through this process, have always had more than 20 potential partners in their community. It's pretty amazing once you start really looking at them. So you may have above that line to interview, you may have a dozen different candidates that you want to interview. So what is this? So, all right, so I'm going to stop here for a minute, Nora, and I'm going to see if there are any questions before we talk about the suggested schedule.
Good. Thank you. Well, I have a bunch of questions.
Oh, awesome.
So if any of you have questions, you can send them to me privately, or you can post them in the chat box publicly. Either way is fine. So yeah, I have several questions I'd like to ask. One is around who should be on the team. You articulated that very clearly and put out the graph. But there's this dilemma of, do you bring people into the process who may not be like-minded, but are critical to your organization? You know, there's this thing about who are you bringing over the fence and who do you focus on for this? And there are pros and cons to bringing people who think the way you do and people who are different from you and are going to have, complicate the process perhaps, but have a different perspective.
That's such a great question. And I would love to hear what your experience is with that question. I mean, in my view, if you have a whole team of people who are opposed to the very idea of a strategic restructuring, you're not going to get very far with the idea anyway, right? So you're going to have people within the organization who are open to it. That being said, I think having a voice on that team or a couple of voices on that team who are going to ask really hard questions, who are going to be the outlier, you know, who are going to kind of push and prod, because then you can work things out. You know, you understand what the pitfalls are, you understand what the challenges are, you understand what the drawbacks are, and you can be addressing them through the process. So yeah, you know that saying, right, about keep your friends close and your enemies closer. I don't think you want enemies on your core team, but I think you do want people who could be vocally challenging outside of the process. So bring them in, as long as they meet that other criteria.
Right. And that was, to answer your question, that was my experience. I had about 4 individuals on a critical decision. And there was one I knew had a differing opinion. And I did bring them into the process. And I found it was very healthy, because when they voiced their opinion, I said nothing. The others are the ones who were convinced that this person that that's not the direction for the organization. And I think once they saw that others on the team really wanted to move this forward, and there was another perspective, and it wasn't coming from me, and they weren't left out, their voice was heard, they came along.
Right.
So the other question I have is, there's not always a balance in numbers. So some of us have a very robust board, a robust staff. It could be a much smaller organization that you're dealing with. How critical is it to have sort of a balance in the numbers, you know, during, I'll call it the negotiation, but that's probably not a fair word.
Oh, well, yeah, you're kind of skipping ahead, right, to the place where you found your potential partner, and now you have 2 teams that are negotiating together. Is that the part of the process you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think having 2 teams of roughly equal size is important.
Okay. Okay.
I do.
The other question,
and besides, if I'll just add to that. For one thing, if you've got 5 to 7 people on your core team, and they have 5 to 7 people on their core team, that is plenty of people to be managing in a process like this.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking more of the circumstance where you've picked 5 to 7 people and they have 2.
I see.
Yeah, and it concerns me, right, that they will feel unrepresented or underrepresented, and they may not have a big team that they can draw from.
Right. Actually, you know, the question prompted me to think of another have another thought, and that is that, you know, at no point in my presentation did I say that you're looking through this process for an organization to acquire you, right? You might be, but I think that organizations who go through this process should go in with a really open mind. You know, you may go into the process thinking, oh, we have to have a bigger organization kind of take us over. Well, it might be that there are a couple organizations that come together, right, that are all roughly the same size. Or it might be that you are acquiring an organization. So talking about this process, I think going into it with an open mind is really important. Sometimes it can help to have an outside voice. I mean, as I've said at the beginning, we're really trying to create a process here that's kind of do it yourself, but it can help to have a coach, a consultant who's, you know, kind of in the background there, just helping keep you on track and helping you think about things in a different way.
So the other question I had when you were doing the presentation is about the priority list, and you talked about mission alignment.
Right.
And I have a dilemma on that one. Sometimes the partner organization doesn't have a good alignment on mission, but they have an alignment with, I'll say, the client service group. Where another circumstance I personally had was the mission alignment wasn't perfect, but as we got into the process, we discovered that they were willing to change their mission.
Oh, interesting.
you know, and adapt it to add,
Right.
you know, what was necessary to our organization. And so I'm kind of curious about how far you go. I feel like a lot of nonprofits get stuck on mission alignment as
Hmm.
opposed to sort of being more open about the opportunities to work together, even though our missions aren't perfectly aligned.
Well, you know, that exercise that I talked about in the second point about really doing a self-assessment and starting with a deep understanding of what your mission really is, and using that time with the team to peel away things that are they're important, but they're not central. They're not the mission. And I think going through that process helps a core team really understand what their mission is about and look at the mission of other organizations maybe in a different way, right? Um, so it doesn't have to be the same mission. It just has to be, aligned. You could have two organizations that are serving two completely different populations but they're both committed to education as a part of their mission. And even though it doesn't look at first like there's alignment, when you've learned how to look at a mission in that kind of deep way, I think you begin to see alignment where at first glance you didn't see it. Does that make sense?
Yes, sorry, I'm muted.
That's okay.
Great. I have one more. This was someone brought in a tangential question, that the weighting of the relationship, friend, frenemy, and partner, that might preclude some interesting partnerships. So I think that kind of relates to, and if you were on last week, Luis brought up how important the relationship is, but that's not to say it can't be developed. But you do have to have trust. It all begins with trust.
That's right. Yeah, this is a process to move you quickly. Like you're going to end up with a dozen organizations in that magic triangle of people who are friends, who are or frenemies or partners. I guess in the interest of efficiency, my recommendation always is to start there. Not just because you're a friend or a partner, because there are all of these other metrics that you're looking at as well, but start there. One question might be, like if you unwound that, well, if they're not a friend or a frenemy or a partner, why are they even on our list? Well, that's because you may go through that list of 6 or 8 or 12 partners, and you might not find a partner. But you've gone through this process of identifying all of the potential partners, vetting them using your organizational metrics, and there may be an outlier that you end up going to. In fact, I've been working with an organization right now that they had a 98% overall match, good mission alignment, had all the things that this organization needed, and they were beginning the negotiation process right when COVID-19 hit, and everything just stopped. And the organization that they were looking at as a potential partner ended up having to withdraw because they were so overwhelmed by the needs of their clients in this context. So they're going back to the grid. They're going back to that scatter plot. They're going back to the work we did. And they're now talking to an organization that fell outside of that magic triangle. And it looks like it has real potential of going forward. So you go through the whole process because you never know how this information is going to be necessary. So is that helpful?
I think we just have a few minutes left. And I know one of the things you want to go through is a timeline, and then tell us a little bit about what we can expect to learn next week.
Right. This is great. This went all the way back to the beginning. Sorry, everyone. Let's see. We went through this really fast, Nora. This is a lot of information for people. So I'm glad you're recording it so they can go back and listen to different parts of it. They'll have the PowerPoint slides to look at. This is a schedule that I suggest. This is how I kind of put all of these pieces together. First thing, the CEO or executive director and the board president meet and identify a slate of nominees for the core team. Go ahead and score them. And you guys come up with the folks you'd like to have on your team, a slate. That meeting shouldn't take more than an hour. Goes to a board meeting. The board meeting votes to form the core team. The entire board needs to know that and be on board with the fact that you're initiating this process. And the core team should have the full support and the formal authorization of the board to move forward. Once the core team is together, you have a first meeting, 2-hour meeting, you do the self-assessment and you create your organization-specific metrics. The second time the core team gets together, this is going to take about an hour, and you're going to meet with all of those stakeholders that you've identified. That may be, 4 to 6 stakeholders. And that's where you're going to make that big list of potential partners. Once you've done that, you have that list in place, hand the scoring sheet over to the staff and have the CEO or ED work with some key members of the staff to go through each of those organizations and give them a score. They're gonna know these organizations probably better than anybody else. You might have another member of the core team, a board member who's maybe in the same industry or works with it, who might have information. Include them in this work as well. But in my experience, it's usually the staff that does the scoring of those potential partners. Once that's done, get the core team back together again for another 2-hour meeting, and that's where you're going to be plotting them, and you're going to be selecting the organizations that you want to interview. And at that meeting, you're also going to create some metric-specific interview questions. That meeting is about 2 hours. So in this first half of this process, your core team has committed to about 5 hours of meeting. Your CEO and key staff is going to have a couple of additional hours in terms of scoring, but you can really get this process done, even though it seems very involved. It can be done really pretty quickly. You have any questions about that, Nora?
Nope.
Okay. Well, in part 2 of this series, the second webinar, we're going to be looking at using those metrics that you create for your organization. We're going to use those metrics to create interview questions. We'll talk about how to design and use a rubric to score those interviewees. If you're a teacher, you know what a rubric is. It's a thing that you use to grade somebody. So we'll talk about creating a rubric to score those interviewees and talk about how to score them. And once you've scored them, how do you select your number one? The one organization that you're going to recommend to your board, these are the folks that we want to work with in this process. And we'll also talk a little bit about how to communicate with your key stakeholders and what you need to share with who, when. So that's part 2 of this series. Any
Great.
Final questions?
Well, we're at our time. And so if you do have questions, you can feel free. Kelly has put her email up on the screen. You can feel free to reach out to her directly with your questions or let me know and I will put you in contact. And I just want to thank you, Kelly. That was really terrific. And because it sparked so many different questions, that's a positive thing. So thank you very, very much. I'm really looking forward to next week.
Thanks.
Thank you all for joining us. If there were any glitches, there were a couple of people who didn't get the right link. So apologies for that, but we will be working on it. We're getting better and better at this technology just in time. Thanks everyone for joining us today.
See you next time.